Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. This is our pre-show live stream for episode 6 of season 2 of House of the Dragon. Yes, we're at episode 6 already. This means we're quite close to the end of the season, everyone. So the storylines are starting to head towards the end. I think we need to keep that in mind as we're looking at all of the different storylines we've got, is that we've really now only got 3 episodes to go. So where we are after next episode, the one we've got coming up, is pretty much the end game. So anyway, I will start with the 2 usual parish notices. Number 1, this is a charity live stream. If you are enjoying these live streams, if you're enjoying the show, if you're feeling generous, please, 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 this is in aid of International Rescue, which is a fantastic charity. And what they do is they, without any discrimination, just go into the places where humans are hurting the most, where there's war, where there's disasters. They go and do 2 things. The first thing they do is they provide whatever immediate aid is needed. Is that food? Is that medical care? Is that shelter? Whatever it is, they'll go and do that. Then the second thing they'll do is try and rebuild people's lives. Whatever the boring thing that is needed, is it a loan to help get you back on your feet? Is it helping you build something again? Whatever it is, that's what they go and do. And so this feels very appropriate for this show, it has to be said, which is all about, well, it's not all about, but there is a lot of death and destruction. And so this is just a way that you can just show your heart in the real world. So I'm not going to labour this anymore. If you wish to show your appreciation, there is a link somewhere. If you're watching this, it will be up. Even if you're watching a replay of this, then it's somewhere. Please do be as generous as you are able. So that's notice number 1. Notice number 2 is your spoiler warning. It's the same as it always has been on this channel. Show spoilers are not okay. We will happily talk about what's happened in the past. We will happily talk about things that are official, that we know, trailers, etc., about what will happen in the future. But leaks for this episode or future episodes, we will not be talking about. I'm aware there are a couple of small leaks for this episode, so moderators, keep an eye out for that. But we're not going to be talking about them here. Book spoilers, however, are fine. The books have been out for a long time. If you want to read them, you can. I will happily talk about what happens in the books. That may or may not be what happens on the TV show. So those are your spoiler warnings. What we will do, as we generally do on these pre-show live streams, I'm going to carry on for maybe 2 hours. For those who are asking, there are always some who are asking. The show is going to air in, as of now, just under 4 hours' time. So whatever that is, local time for you, that's when the show is coming on. For me, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, Central European time. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I think East Coast America is about 9 p.m. over there for you. So that's what we're looking at. We'll be carrying on for about 2 hours here. I will start off with a bit of a summary of where we're at from last episode, and then I've got some questions from my patrons, and I will pick up as much in the chat as I can. Okay, so let's get going. Let's talk about last episode. So episode 5, this picked up in the wake of the Battle of Rook's Rest. So everybody's still reeling from what happened there. And this was the first proper battle, it has to be said, of the Dance of the Dragons. Yes, we had the Bracken and Blackwood thing going on, but this was the first time we had proper dragons and land forces at the same time having a battle. And this seems to have left a lot of people quite traumatized, understandably so, because dragons are kind of scary. And a lot of people are weighing up the balance of power here because one side, Team Black, they've lost Rhaenys, they've lost Melies, they've lost the castle, Rook's Rest, which was maybe not hugely strategically important, but it was the castle of a key ally. Team Green, however, have lost their king. Their king is now comatose, effectively. And they've also lost one of their dragons, and they don't have too many dragons. They've got, let's remember, they've got Vhagar, obviously massive, very scary. They've got Dreamfire, Helena, Dreamfire. We're not expecting Dreamfire to be taking any particular military action certainly they didn't in the books, and we're not expecting it on the show. And then we've got Tessarion down in Old Town that's still well out of sort of the main arena of war. So does this tip the balance of power? Well, probably it slightly tips it in favor of Team Black, it has to be said, but still Vhagar is there, and Vhagar could one-on-one probably take out any of the remaining dragons. And the issue for dragons for Team Black, and the issue that they've got is probably their scariest dragon rider combination is Daemon, and they don't really know what's going on with him. We'll pick up on him in just one moment, because probably on a personal level, of the characters we know, the one who was hit most is Corlys. Now, Rhaenys obviously was his wife, and we should probably just take a moment just to sort of tip our hats to one of the only positive relationships we've got here in dance in the dance, but also in House of the Dragon. It wasn't a perfect marriage. Surely it wasn't a perfect marriage, but two strong characters who clearly cared about each other. They clearly listened to each other. They clearly prioritized each other in many ways. And Corlys's pain is palpable. I think they even opened that episode with him just almost staggering to sit down once he'd heard the news. And it's worth taking a moment just to think for Corlys what all of this has cost him. It's cost him as a war and the build up to the war. Yes, it's cost him his wife, who was out there on a mission for Rhaenyra. It cost him his son, who he probably still thinks Rhaenyra and Daemon ordered the assassination of. Laena died giving birth to Daemon's child. Then he's also lost his grandson, who was going to be his heir, Lucerys, on a mission for Rhaenyra. He's also lost his brother, who Daemon, I would say decapitated, but half decapitated, took off the top of his head. He's lost so many of the closest family that he has, and now suddenly he gets offered being Hand of the Queen to Rhaenyra, and yeah, he's almost certainly going to accept, but he has to see this as just a poison chalice. What's going to happen next? Which is going to be the next of his loved ones to die for this cause? So that's the first kind of drama that we're included in. Then we get the Black Council as a whole. Now, the Black Council as a whole is we spent quite a bit of time looking at the Green Council, how the Green Council are not being particularly effective. They're at each other's throats. Aegon was not managing it particularly well. Let's see how Aemond manages it. But Team Black and the Black Council is not being much better, it has to be said. When Rhaenyra came back, came back from her mission to King's Landing, that is, who's the person who was there just saying, that was reckless, what on earth were you doing? You should have told us. This was her own son, Jace. We've got Alfred Broom, who's there at every opportunity, basically telling her that she's in the wrong. Lord Celtigar is similarly quite critical. And she seems not to be able to control it very well. So what happens here is yet more evidence of the Black Council being quite splintered. Jace, who, yes, he's the heir to the throne, but he should be following the lead of his mother. He basically says, no, I'm going to go. She's told me I need to stay at home, but I'm going to go out. I'm going to do something. And eventually he decides he's going to head off up to the twins. And this is a diplomatic mission from his mother that his mother knows nothing about. he just heads off. He heads off and he negotiates with the Freys. Now, the kind of the geopolitical thing, I've seen a couple of people wondering exactly why this is important in the books. Then, well, on the show, it's so that the Northerners can cross over and then head down the west side of the Green Fork. Fine. In the books, they don't worry about this. Doesn't happen in the books. In the books, they don't worry about that. The Winter Wolves head down the King's Road all the way, and it's not an issue. Uh, the the slight tweak we have here for the show, which kind of makes this work, is that we've had, what are we at, 5 episodes now of reports that the Lannisters are they're mustering an army, but we've not seen the Lannister army yet. It's very slow, and so there is a chance if they're going to be coming up and attacking, say, Harrenhal, which seems to be the plan. There is a chance the Winter Wolves could cut them off before they get there. So that seems to be the idea. And anyway, Jace goes up there, he negotiates with them, he gives them a few concessions, including Harrenhal, it has to be said. And this was without permission from his mother. So basically, he was going there outside of the Queen's authority and giving away one of the prize castles in the Riverlands in all of Westeros. So she doesn't have huge amounts of control there. So Alfred Broom, she does decide to do something with. She says, okay, can you go off to see Daemon? And she sends him off basically to say, what are you up to? What's going on? Daemon has not sent anything back. He went off. He's sent nothing. The clear implication Team Black are thinking he's going to Harrenhal. He's going to get us our army, but they've heard nothing. So she wants to know what are his intentions, because she genuinely doesn't know. So Alfred Broom's gone off, and probably this is also a little bit clever from Rhaenyra, just getting rid of, pardon me, the most awkward member of her council as well. So then we get Messalina, who appears, and Rhaenyra is clearly frustrated at this point. How do I win this war? My council don't want me heading off and doing stuff. If I can't head out on my dragon, then the other dragons we have are probably no match for Vhagar. I don't know what's going on with Daemon. My council are rebellion. I still don't have an army. She's frustrated. And so Messalina comes in and basically says, look, we can try and do this in a different way. We don't get to hear her plan, but it's very clear from the context that this is something to do with the small folk of King's Landing. This is something to do with the fact that, as we've seen time and time again, the food situation's not good. The morale is not great. Aegon was there, hanging the rat catchers who were innocent. All except one of them were completely innocent. He just hung them from the walls of the Red Keep. Hundreds, thousands of people will have known them and just seen somebody murdered, my friend, husband, lover, son, whatever. And so there is discontent there, kind of rumbling underneath the radar. She sends Alinda Massey, her lady in waiting, who, I mean, this is quite, for the nerds, I suspect, probably found this quite as me. She's on a secret mission, and yet you can see as she goes out, just beneath her cloak is the house sigil, just like on her top, which is like, oh, so that's who you are. But anyway, she heads off into King's Landing, and she gets there. She manages to get her way in, and she goes and talks to, I always forget her name, Deanna. Deanna is the serving girl you will remember from season 1 who Aegon abused, basically. And then we did see her again in season 2. She's there serving people in that sort of inn/brothel where we saw Ulf the White. And now we get Alinda goes to speak to her. Now, what is this? I've got a question about this in a moment, so I'll go into more detail then. But this is clearly tying in with this idea that you don't just have to win the war with fights and dragons and battles and things like that. You can win it in slightly subtler ways. So let's talk about Damon. Damon, he's still technically, I mean, we're all thinking about like his vision quest and whatever else is going on there, but he's still technically trying to gather an army at the moment over in Harrenhal. And he's got the Brackens theoretically on side. And what he agreed to deal, this was back in episode 4, he agreed to deal, okay, you'll come and be the main part of my army as long as he goes to sort out the Brackens first. So he's there. Team Blackwood are going to support him as long as he sorts out the Brackens first. And he arrives on Caraxes, clearly expecting that he can intimidate them. And the Brackens just say, nope, and just walk away. And he has underestimated the depth of the hatred between these two groups, that actually they would rather die than follow the Blackwood lead. So Damon's response to this is to agree to let the Blackwoods go on a spree, go on a what we would probably today call a war crimes spree. Just he doesn't spell it out, but he says, "Yeah, don't do it in my name, but just make sure that everybody's aware. This is what happens if you don't do what we want." And so the Blackwoods go out and do this. And this kind of turns against him, it has to be said, because the Blackwoods do this under a Targaryen banner. And so, yes, the Brackens bend the knee. They have to eventually. But then the Riverlords come and say, we're not going to do this. I'm sorry. You're a tyrant. This is horrific what's just happened here. And so Damon is right back at square one. At which point we suddenly get Alice Rivers reappearing, because obviously this is all about him and Alice Rivers and Harrenhal and the Weirwood network. The bigger picture here is, yes, he has to get the army, but he's being held back here in Harrenhal while things happen. And we can explore that a little bit in a moment. But she comes and basically says she's heard stuff on the wind and she knows what he's been dreaming about, because he has another dream. This one, a slightly more concerning one about his mother. His mother basically saying, "Oh, you were my favorite son," which actually echoes what Viserys. If you go back to season 1, Viserys jokes with Damon saying, "Oh, you were always mother's favorite." Damon was 3 when his mother died, so he won't really. He'll just remember snatches of her. And yet this clearly impacted him. And I think I've got a video coming out next week about this, but a lot of Damon's character comes from these core childhood memories, and this loss of his mother and then his father as well. His father raised the two of them, but soon got dragged into running the Seven Kingdoms, basically. So Damon gets this message from his mother, and then immediately he takes it up a notch in terms of where he's at in terms of his massive treason. It's no longer, hey, I'm the king consort. Hey, let's forget about that last bit. That's a bit boring to say the whole thing. Let's just call me king, right? And yeah, maybe you can get away with that without that being treason, but everybody knows really he's pushing it a bit. And then it's like, I'm going to go down to King's Landing. I will claim the Iron Throne. If Rhaenyra wishes to join me, she can. And in his mind, this is really shifted. But Alice Rivers is not having any of this. So she basically calls him out on the war crimes. And then she also basically admits that she knows what he's dreaming about. But keep an eye on the bigger narrative here, which is the fact that the River Lords come and basically say, you're a tyrant. You're horrific. And remember what's happened already in this season is we've had that march, the one that Otto ordered, the funeral march that led to people calling Rhaenyra the Monstrous out. Then we get Aegon, and they're all aghast. What's Aegon? Aegon's murdered all of these people, and now we get Daemon, who is the tyrant, and surely we're soon going to get the people turning on Aemond as well. How long is it going to be? I mean, book readers will probably know, but how long is it going to be before the small folk and the people more broadly in and around the area start to think, aren't all Targaryens pretty awful to us? Because that's the meta narrative going on here, is that the Targaryens are not in touch with the small folk. Okay, so we then can move to King's Landing. And we've already talked about the small folk. One of the things, it was sort of in passing, but I think it was quite an important one. When we get Criston Cole coming back from the Battle of Rook's Rest, he's there with Gwaine Hightower. They're sort of parading their way through King's Landing, obviously thinking, hey, this is a victory parade. We've just won a great victory. Let's tell everyone we won a great victory. They're not sure whether this was a great victory, but they have a dragon's head that they can parade through and say, look, here's Meleys, a drag. We've slain this dragon. The people, however, almost shocked into silence. And there's like mutters, I mean, this is not a good omen. This is bad. What's Rhaenyra going to do? Rhaenyra's side have just lost a dragon. Is she going to come and get us now? And there was this very telling scene, I thought, just a short one, where you get the Melly's head comes past, and then you get this rando small folk guy saying, I thought that the dragons, I thought that they were gods. And then you get why do I always get a brain freeze when I'm just trying to think of the names? Dragonseed guy, you know who I'm talking about, the Smith, and he suddenly says, they're not gods, they're just meat. And this is a really important point, because it's a realization from the people that the dragons aren't up there somewhere that they can't touch. Actually, you can kill dragons, you can destroy them, and this is probably not going to pay off until some point late in season 3, but it's an important mental shift for the people of King's Landing. Then we get to Aegon himself. Now, Aegon was dragged through the Hugh Hammer. Thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, of course, it's Hugh Hammer. Hammer time. Thank you. Then we get to Aegon himself. Now, when we left at the end of episode 4, he was clearly not in good shape. He comes through in this big sort of coffin-like box, but they were kind of trying to hide it. He comes in. He has survived. Now, the first thing to say is that, wow, and I think we have to put this down to the Valyrian steel armor. He fell from a huge height, and he got Dracarys to the face. How is he still alive? The only way that you can possibly imagine is because this armor is magical. And we may not look at it and think that that seems like the kind of armor that could save him, but when they're kind of peeling it off of it, it was a really icky scene, wasn't it? When they were peeling the armor off of him, you have to say that must have been what saved him. But he's still alive, and we hear him sort of call out mummy, so we know that he is still alive. And this is going to be an important thing, because something to watch out for this coming episode is, how much does he remember? And if he remembers it all, what's he going to say? Because is he going to remember that Aemond rode Vagar straight at him and then just said Dracarys? Because that would be massive. But he's in a very delicate situation. His life is now in the hands of the Maesters. But while he is, and people know that he is not in the best of health and not able to run the kingdoms or the Seven Kingdoms, somebody has to take over. And it's, I thought it was a really good scene. Alicent she doesn't seem to talk to anyone beforehand, but she's like, I'll be the regent. But then everyone says no. Now you can kind of understand this if we sort of detach our 21st century brains from this. If we just say, okay, their entire business case, as it were, the entire reason for Aegon being the king rather than Rhaenyra is because it has to be a man. And if within a few weeks of the start of the war, when the man dies, they'll put a woman basically ruling in his stead, that does seem to slightly undermine their position. So you can kind of understand it. And Aemond is, in the show, next in line. In the books, he's not. There's Maelor there. We'll talk about Maelor a bit later. But in the show, it actually kind of makes sense that he is next in line. Kristen Cole is probably the one that his vote was probably the one that hurts Alicent the most, because obviously they've got this kind of weird connection, the two of them. But firstly, as we saw at the end of the previous episode, he has been really affected by this. I'm not going to say he's on a redemption arc, but I will say that all of the kind of the gung-ho attitude that he used to have, all of the hatred seems to have gone. He seems to be almost an empty shell of a man at the moment. Except when Alicent challenges him on, why did you not support me? The answer seems to be quite a gallant one, if that's the right word. That he's seen how horrific this war's going to be. He knows how terrible this is going to be. And he knows the kinds of decisions that whoever's leading this will have to make. So he thinks not making her leader is actually a mercy. Now, that's quite a condescending attitude to have from his perspective, from his side, clearly, but that's where he's coming from, is that he is not the same character we saw at the very beginning of this season. He has been changed. Now, what they do with that in the show, I don't know yet, but expect to see this as the next character that we look at. And this has happened a few times. This happened with Alicent, Otto a little bit, Aegon, where we go, I really hate that character. And it's like, but I can kind of see his side. Expect that to happen at some point with Kristen Cole, where he's a changed person. And I suspect they will show us that. But anyway, Aemond is now Prince Regent and Protector of the Realm. Now there's a small shift from the book. In the book, he claimed the crown. Here he did not. We've not seen the crown, but he seems not to have taken it. Then we get we should probably just mention Hugh Hammer. I remembered his name this time. We get a little bit more on him. His daughter is still very clearly very unwell, and they decide that they're going to be leaving and they should head away. Now, where they're going to head away to, she has a brother in Tumbleton. Now, I already told you, book spoilers are absolutely fine here. So in Tumbleton, in the war to come, that's not a good place to go. So we can immediately go down some kind of speculatory route here, which is that Hugh comes across quite well, it has to be said. So far, he's come across as a family man, quite caring. If we had to pick a fault, it would be that he's a bit too trusting, that the powers that be in the Red Keep would keep to their word. But other than that, he seems to be good, upstanding member of society. Now, that may change, but that's what we've been shown so far. And that is a long, long way from the character that we see portrayed in Fire and Blood, who starts out, I mean, we don't know huge amounts about him, but he starts out as being presented as a bit of a brute of a man. And then by the time he gets into war proper, then he's overtaken by a lust for power. He goes to Tumbleton, and at Tumbleton, he decides, you know what? There's a prophecy which is probably actually referring to Robert Baratheon in the future about a man with a hammer defeating Targaryens, and he takes that to be about himself, and he gets quite this big head, and he decides maybe he ought to be king himself, and he's on Vermithor. Vermithor is a massive dragon. You can kind of understand suddenly getting a little bit full of himself. If his wife and child, who he seems to care about more than anything and anyone else in the world, goes down to Tumbleton, and if the horrors of Tumbleton, for Tumbleton is a horrific place during the war, if they happen to them, that might explain why he turns, why he changes from being this slightly positive family man to somebody who just wants to claim the crown for themselves. So that's all sort of speculating on into the future. Then season 2, maybe if season 3, maybe even season 4, who knows? But it was an interesting little lore drop with Tumbleton there. And if that's where I mean, they didn't get to leave, so they don't get to go there. And we have to say this is another episode where neither Ulf nor Hugh managed to leave King's Landing. And in order to be part of the Dragon Seeds, they would have to get over to Dragonstone. So are they going to change the Dragon Seed story? Is it going to be later than we were expecting? Who knows? But this is taking a while to develop. But talking about the Dragon Seeds, we get the starting inklings of this, where we get Jace basically saying, we've got 2 dragons, Vermithor and Silverwing, just down here. Why don't we see whether we can get riders for them? And they start by trying to figure out who might be married into the wider Targaryen family that they've not thought about. Now, they will have to go back generations, sort of out to cousins, things like that. But they're immediately thinking about who's like an official member or attached officially to House Targaryen. They're still not thinking about what seems to be the first thing that was the thought in the book, which was like, are there any Targaryen bastards lying around? So we're still at least an episode away from that as well. But this is the start of the process. The start of the process of we need to find more Dragon Riders. And it loops back to where we started this episode. The balance of power has slightly shifted after the Battle of Rook's Rest, but it's still not 100% in anyone's favor. Team Black, probably you would expect if the 3 of them, they've got 3 dragons there. Rhaenyra's got a dragon, Jace has got a dragon. Baylor's got a dragon. If the three of them all tried to take on Vhagar at once, probably they would win, but they couldn't be sure. So the way to be sure is to get at least one of these other two dragons that they've got on side. So this is the start of that storyline. And the other thing, just before we start going to questions, the other thing to probably note was the Eyrie. Rhaena has arrived at the Eyrie, and we flagged this up as an issue when she left, which was that, as far as we can tell, we didn't actually see it, but as far as we can tell, Jace came to an agreement with Lady Jane Arryn that the Arryns would supply 15,000 soldiers, which is a lot for their war effort, in exchange for one dragon to protect the Vale. Now, it doesn't really come across very well, I think, on the TV shows when you're looking at the Eyrie. In fact, they've had, I think, at least 3 different designs for the Eyrie on the TV shows, each of which has looked less impregnable, it has to be said. But in the book, when you read the book, the Eyrie is just so you could not imagine anyone actually actively attacking it, because you get half a chapter, half of Cat's chapter is just climbing the mountain to get to it. This single track climb, winding its way around the outside of this mountain. At one point, she has to be on the back of a donkey that could, because she would not, as a human, she would not be able to find the right path going up. So a donkey has to carry her. Another point, she has to be carried up in like a big basket, because it's like there's this next step that you either have to sort of climb one person at a time up a ladder or go up it's horrific, the idea. An army could not, they'd have to attack one at a time, and the mountain itself would kill half of them. So the only way to effectively attack the Eyrie would be by a dragon. And so Lady Jane Arryn, it's a very sensible thing to say, send me a dragon. But when Rhaena arrives, it's Rhaena plus 3 small children, 2 dragon hatchlings, like teeny tiny dragons, and 4 dragon eggs. And that's not enough to protect. That's not what she wanted. If Vhagar came across to attack, 4 dragon eggs and 2 teeny tiny dragons would not save the day. So we get a little bit of this confrontation that we were expecting, but still Jane Arryn kind of allows her to stay. So it's not quite as terminal as we feared. Okay, and I think with that we will get on to some questions. Let me have a quick flick through the chat. Turbo saying, why is the pre-show so early? I hate waiting around for another 2 hours for the show. Well, I'm very sorry. The pre-show starts at 10 p.m. my time. That's why. If I were living on a slightly more sympathetic time zone, then I would do a post-show. As it is, post-show here would be 3 a.m. my time. And I'm afraid I'm an old man these days and I can't do that. Andrew Kay saying, despite House of the Dragon's more negative portrayal of Daemon, rather than more ambiguous, as in the text, at least his vision suggests dealing with guilt and regret, seemingly unlike Aemond. Yeah, so this is the main thing. I think a lot of people have queried this storyline. It certainly slowed Daemon down a huge amount in a way that wasn't apparent in the books. The point is that this is Daemon dealing with the demons of his past. Now, I think we then have to stop and think, well, what's the logical end point of that? He's here dealing with people just accusing him of stuff. And these are planted dreams and visions. Let's not forget, this seems to be Alice seems to be doing this. The Weirwood Network seems to be doing this. So this is a bigger agenda going on here. But yeah, this is not just, oh, he's had some weird dreams. This is dreams with a purpose. This is character development stuff. So we should expect to see the Daemon who emerges from this being a changed Daemon to the Daemon who arrived. And that should be worth the 4 episodes or whatever it will turn out to be of him going through all of these dreams. Let's go with a question from Carolina Clay saying, "Hi, Robert. Hope you're well. I am, thank you. At what point do you think the show will end? Rhaenyra's death, Aegon III's coronation? As a history nerd, I'd love to see the Regency and the Hour of the Wolf and all that, but I'm not sure the audience would enjoy that very much. My friend suggested it would be good to end it with Aegon III marrying Jaehaera, which is kind of the end of the dance, but I'd really like to see the end of characters like Laris, Alyn, Viserys II, and all the Lyseni people. I think for this show, people are more interested in dragons and battles than in court intrigue, but I do love a balance of the two. What do you think? In your ideal world, what should each future season cover? And in a realistic scenario, what do you think is going to happen?" Okay, so I've uh, I've kept I think relatively consistently since the show was announced. I've kept to this idea of what I would do, which is season one is the build up to the dance, up to around Viserys' death. Season two is the opening salvos of the dance, up to and spoiler warning again, if you happen to be stumbling across this, I will be telling you what happens in the books. Season two up to the fall of King's Landing, Rhaenyra taking King's Landing. Season three up to the second fall of King's Landing, Rhaenyra hounded out of King's Landing. Season four takes us up to, it covers all of the chaos that follows and takes us up to the Hour of the Wolf. That is where I think, if I were running this, that's where I would end it. Now, I would also love a season, maybe even more, I'm greedy, covering the Regency. But I don't think that's what they're going to do. As for what is going to happen, I mean, I have to say at the moment they're broadly on track with what I said all that time ago. I mean, obviously season one was roughly the build up. I mean, that was the easy win. Season two, where are they going to end this? I still think they're roughly on track for the fall of King's Landing at the end of this season. It might be episode 7, it might be episode 8, but I think very broadly speaking, that seems to be where this arc is taking us. Either that or that's going to be the first episode of season 3. Then I think it kind of makes sense if they carried on at the same speed to take them up to the second fall of King's Landing seems about right. Then season 4, it is just chaos. Lots of things going on all over the place. So that would cover all the way through to Rhaenyra's death. I think that would cover all the way through to Aegon II's death, and all the way until we get the Hour of the Wolf. So my take, and hang on, just because I think this is still the most likely way they will end it. So how does this sound? This is the end of the chapter. That in Fire and Blood, you get a chapter called Aftermath, the Hour of the Wolf, and this is how it ends. Cregan Stark's brief service as the hand of the uncrowned king ended the next day when he returned his chain of office to Prince Aegon. He might easily have remained king's hand for years, or even claimed the regency until young Aegon came of age, but the south held no interest for him. "The snows are falling in the north," he announced, "and my place is at Winterfell." Now, that, I don't know whether George R. R. Martin wrote this with a TV show in mind, but that for me feels like the end of the show. Is if you've read it, you will know Cregan Stark comes down. I don't think, a lot of people say, "Wow, Cregan Stark, what a guy." I think there are a lot of layers going on there. I don't think he'll come across as what a guy so much when we actually see him on the show. But when he comes down and then just decides, you know what, I could take control here. I've got the only viable army left, but I'm not going to. Here's the Hand of the King badge. I'm going to go back north now. That for me strikes me as a perfect way to end this show. Maybe they'll find another perfect way, but this seems to be the way that they do it. Lone Wolf saying Sir Crispin dies this season? Question mark. I think in early third season. I mean, I don't know. He should die at some point in the next few episodes. It really depends on the speed at which this moves from now on. My kind of storytelling side says his arc would come to an end naturally at the end of this season. We've seen his arc where he started this hateful towards Rhaenyra. Then we get the Alicent thing. Then we get him saying, there's no forgiveness for me for what I've done. And now we've got this Horrors of War version. And I think that takes him to the end. If I had to guess, and again, I've got no inside knowledge on this at all, but if I had to guess, I would say that seems like a season 8 thing. What a way to end the season, just with Criston Cole's death, which is pretty. I mean, I don't know if horrific's the right way to go, but it's like it's a notable death. It's not just like there was a big battle and he died in the middle of it. It's a notable death, and I suspect this is going to be like one of those things, a bit like when Littlefinger died and everyone cheered. That's the kind of feel, and maybe they might want to do it at the beginning of the next season, but this feels like an end of this season arc thing. Brian R saying, I'd love to see Cregan march into the small council meeting with Ice and his Northmen looking for a fight. Yeah, well, we will. Andrew K saying horrific, more like satisfying. Yeah, so this is the thing. This is why I think that Criston Cole, if I had to guess, Criston Cole, his death, I think so many people will find satisfying, as you see. Let's go to Sir Friend. Happy Sunday, Robert, and to you. With the similarities that George has set up between the dance and A Song of Ice and Fire, do you think we should be seeing some similarities between Rhaenyra and Tyrion? They were both inadvertently involved in events that sparked a war. Both were then ruling in King's Landing when the small folk rioted. History didn't look kindly on Rhaenyra, possibly because she was a woman. Maybe she did a better job with what she had than first thought. Maybe Tyrion did a fine job, but was painted to be the villain. Almost certainly because he was a dwarf. Is there something there? Yes, quite possibly. George R. Martin loves his echoes between something that happened in history and something that's happened in the main Song of Ice and Fire story. I think the biggest echo in book canon is Rhaenyra to Cersei. Now, both of them kind of reigned over in warfare and came to power when things were already pretty bad. And then we're not sure exactly what Cersei's going to do. But if you read that last chapter, the epilogue to A Dance with Dragons, you see what she's suggesting and thinking, she would be raising taxes. She would be heads on spikes. She would be doing pretty much exactly what Rhaenyra, we're told, did in the books. So that's the biggest echo. As for Tyrion and Rhaenyra, maybe in show canon, yeah, I get that. So Tyrion, the idea is that he was defending King's Landing, did a reasonable job, in fact, did a very good job, but doesn't get any of the credit for it. And it's because he's a dwarf. Rhaenyra on the show, could I see her doing actually quite a reasonable job but not getting any credit for it, and that's because she's a woman? Yeah, I could see that's how they might go with that on the show. I think the starving thing is going to be a bigger issue on the show, and the people rioting. The riot in King's Landing when Tyrion was there was a one-off and relatively contained. What we've got with the rioting in the book, and I'll probably go with this on the show, is that the rioting, it may start off quite small scale, but basically it turns into, by the end of the Dance of the Dragons, this is the Targaryens have been turfed out completely. This is mob rule in King's Landing. Let's do a question from Rassler. Good day, Robert. Hope you and Dan the dog are well. We are, thank you very much. Dan the dog has, as he always does, gone up to bed. Do you foresee Messalina suffering her book fate in the show? Given her love of the small, or for the small people in the show, it would certainly add some tragedy and irony to her fate being destroyed by the thing you championed. Yeah, so this is interesting. In the book, then Messalina, when Rhaenyra flees King's Landing, Messalina stays. And she gets captured. As I say, this is basically mob rule at this point. And she gets told, hey, if you can, we're going to flog you. If you can make it out of the, I think it was out of the city, then you're safe. But we're going to flog you all the way naked. And so she has to walk through King's Landing. And she dies. She doesn't make it. It's horrific. It's tragic. But in the book, she's a very mysterious figure. We don't know huge amounts about her. On the show, she is very much more of a champion for the people. When one of the first times we find her motivation, she's there trying to stop the children fighting in the fighting pits. And that's basically, she has the one in a lifetime opportunity. She's got the new Team Green King she knows where he is. She could have captured him. She could have demanded any price for him. And the price she demands is, yes, a bag full of gold, but also stop the fighting pits. So that is what she values above anything else. So she is standing up for the small folk of King's Landing. Is there an irony to the ending, therefore, that we saw in the books? Yeah, there definitely is an irony. Will they go with it? I don't know. We'll see. My instinct is the further into book, and this is just normal with all adaptations, incidentally, I'm not picking on this show. The further into the books they get, then the bigger the discrepancies will come. So we'll have to see what the situation is with her when we get there. But if we do end up with the same ending, then yeah, that would certainly add a degree of pathos, I think, to it. Jam asking, is Laenor still alive? Hope they explain this before the claiming of sea smoke. Yes, I've got a question on that, but yeah, I would agree. I would like to I would like to think that they explain the law here, the dragon law, about what's going on. And for those who don't know what I mean by that, so as far as we are aware, dragons can only ever bond with one person at any given moment in time. And in the book, what happens is that Laenor, remember Laenor? Laenor was the husband of Rhaenyra. He was gay, and they faked his death, and he escaped over to Essos. They being Rhaenyra and Daemon. In the book, the faked death did not happen. It was pretty clear it didn't happen. It was an actual killing. There's a hint maybe Daemon might have been behind it, but he's definitely dead. So when we get to the dragon seeds moment, and we've got these unclaimed dragons, then Sea Smoke is the third unclaimed dragon who has previously had a rider, Vermithor Silverwing Sea Smoke. And that's all okay. The owner died, we get a new a rider, and that's all right. But on the show, if we're going to get a new rider for Sea Smoke, how does that fit with the fact that Laenor's still alive? So this is a lore issue that should be dealt with. Now, they can deal with it in a number of different ways. Remember, we've got two different canons now. We've got book canon, we've got show canon. So if they go a different way in the show, then that's what the show's doing. It doesn't affect what's happening in the book. But maybe they will have the new rider for Sea Smoke, and then we get. Well, I don't know, but I assume this must mean that Laenor's dead. Okay, let's move on. That'd be one way. Maybe they don't explain it at all. Maybe they just like hand wave it all away. Or maybe we will get a proper explanation. Maybe we will get reading in an ancient scroll. Well, there have been times that a dragon, if its owner abandons them, then they can claim a new owner. Or maybe we'll get a raven from Essos. I don't even know whether Essos have the ravens, but maybe we'll get a message from Essos. Oh, by the way, Laenor's dead. That kind of thing. There are three broad ways they can do this. I don't know. Genuinely don't know how they're going to go with this, and they've not given us the clues yet. The only clue is that Sea Smoke is acting strange. And Messalina suggesting maybe he's lonely. That kind of hints towards the maybe if a dragon gets abandoned, then they can have another rider. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that one. Konstantin Tranos saying, are you worried by the fact that George R. Martin won't attend the season 3 writers meeting? This is reference to him. He's coming over to the UK for, a good couple of weeks or maybe even more next month. This is a long planned trip. He's got a number of different things that he's going to be doing. He's going to go to London. He's going to meet a whole load of friends there and business associates, etc. He's going to go to Oxford, where he's got some kind of panel meeting with Philip Pullman, where he's going to be talking about something or other. He's going to go to Northern Ireland, where he's going to visit the set of Dunk and Egg, and then he's going to go to Glasgow, and Glasgow is where Worldcon is this year. Worldcon that's his big trip every year, or always was before COVID anyway. He goes to Worldcon, so he's going to spend a bit of time here. In this blog post, however, he said specifically that the writing, the season 3 writers' room is meeting in London while he's there, but he's not going to be visiting. Now, am I concerned? Short answer, no. Because this is what I was expecting. He's been very clear. His role in House of the Dragon is not sitting in the writer's room. His role in House of the Dragon is he's in regular, I think at some point it's almost daily contact with Ryan Condler, who was the showrunner. He sort of comes in, he came in at the beginning and talked to the team there. I'm sure he's had another couple of meetings at various points with them. He's downloaded stuff to them. They've run things past him. He's told them the things that are important to him, things like sigils and things like dragon colors, stuff like that. So they're taking stuff on board from him. What he is deliberately not doing is actively engaging himself with the writing of any given episode. So from a book fan perspective, yay, this is another thing he's not doing. He can focus in more on writing the things that I want him to write. In terms of the show, this doesn't change what he's been doing so far. So if you've been enjoying the show so far, then I shouldn't worry about this in the slightest. I think when he said it was an offhand comment in a much longer blog post where a lot of it was moaning about Worldcon not replying to his emails. But I think this was as much as anything else that he's very aware that no matter he's had to disable comments on his blogs, he has done for quite some time. Whatever he puts in his blog, people will come back and say, why aren't you writing Winds of Winter? Why are you doing these things? You should be writing the Winds of Winter. And I think this is probably just him going, okay, well, I'll just head off this. If I say I'm going to go to the writer's room and I will engage myself in helping write season 3, everybody would be up in arms and say, don't get involved in the TV shows. We want you to be writing. So I think it was just his simple way of just circumventing that. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. Carolina Clay saying, no, he didn't post it in his blog. It's not a blog. Thank you very much. Yes, it is not a blog. And if you wish to search for his blog, then you have to search for not a blog. Let's go to Rassler. Does Rhaenyra genuinely believe Sir Alfred Broom will have any effect on convincing Daemon? Or does she secretly hope Daemon will kill Alfred and remove a thorn in her side? Okay, so she has sent Sir Alfred Broom, who is probably the most annoying member of her small council, over to Harrenhal. And she gave him the orders to find out Daemon's intentions and ask him what he's doing. And he sort of starts to head off and then says, is there any message you want me to send? And she goes, just tell him I'd very much like to finish our last conversation. So he was not sent to persuade Daemon of anything. And I think this is quite an important part of the dynamic that they've set up between Rhaenyra and Daemon, is that she's not trying to change Daemon. He's not trying to change her as well, actually, it has to be said. She is basically saying, well, Daemon be Daemon. He's going off and doing his thing. But him doing his thing has implications for her and her war effort, because she doesn't have an army right now. She's got some dragons, but she doesn't have an army. So she needs to know from Daemon, are you getting an army for me or are you not? Because if you're not, I need to be dealing with that myself. She needs to know, is he actually going to betray her and make a claim himself? Because if so, he's camped at Harrenhal, and if he's camped at Harrenhal with an army and he's claiming for himself, then suddenly her potential armies coming from the Vale and the North have got another enemy to be worried about. So she doesn't even ask Sir Alfred Broom to ask him outright what his intentions. She said, go there, try and find out his intentions. So that's what she's doing. I think there is definitely a part of this which is, let's get rid of the most annoying person on my council. He'll be gone for a month or more. We don't have to worry about him for a while. I'm sure there's definitely a part of it that is that, but she's trying to find out his intentions. She's not trying to persuade him to come back or anything like that. Realistically, if he turned up, and she will know this, if he turned up to Daemon and said, please come back, we really need you, then, and he'll say, is this from Rhaenyra? And he'll go, well, not really. Then it's not going to be that effective. Elite Weirwood saying, I feel like Damon's arc in Harrenhal is close to done, and then he will come back on side. Well, quite possibly, and I think you're right. It's not too far. I think you need to work your way through who is it. He's seeing characters from his past. He's seen Rhaenyra a couple of times. He's seen Laena. He's seen his mother. I think you just have to sort of sit down. I think it's reasonably obvious who's the last character or characters that he needs to see before he reaches an end to this character arc. Once he's done that, then yes, whether he then comes back, I think, is a different matter. But I think his arc there at Harrenhal will be finished. So don't expect that we've got episode 6. Don't expect him to be there beyond episode 7. I don't think this is not going to carry on for the next 2 or 3 seasons. Let's go with Mike Hanna saying, will we see this more in seasons 3 and 4 with Aemond? It's possible. Yeah, depends how far they want to go with the echoes between the two of them. But basically, Aemond, for those who don't know, Aemond in the book, he goes up to Harrenhal. Daemon's gone, and the army he comes up with also goes, and he's there on his own in Harrenhal. And who's there? Alice Rivers. So is it going to be the same? I think there will, at the very least, be echoes of Daemon's time there. Let's put it that way. That's Andrew K saying would feel a bit repetitive if we got Eamon's version of this as well. Possibly, depends on how they do it. Let's go to Lady Vaughan Strauss. Do you know if House Blackwood is named in honor of author Algernon Blackwood? Besides breast size becoming a factor in national politics, are there any odd stories about them or their home? Okay. Well, on the first bit, I'm afraid I don't know. I did have a quick look. I don't know. It's a very George R. Martin thing to do to name houses after and characters after writers that he likes. So it kind of makes sense if this is um, named after Algernon Blackwood, who was a great kind of fantasy horror writer. As for the second bit, yeah, this is a weird bit of politics. A little while after this story, we get to the time of King Aegon IV. Now, Aegon IV was a bit like if you imagine like a Henry VIII kind of king. He was a drunken, debauched king who had this series of mistresses, and one one mistress he had was a Bracken. Now, I always forget the names of the mistresses. Barbara Bracken. Now, Barbara Bracken was notably buxom, I believe was the word they use in Fire and Blood. So she was a buxom woman. And when he happened to be visiting the area of the Riverlands where she was from, they saw these hills, which were in this kind of like hinterland between the Blackwood lands and the Bracken lands. They both claimed them, and they were these two hills that were shaped and were called the Teats because they looked like breasts. So Aegon IV then called them Barbara's Teats in honor of his mistress. This is the kind of king he was. However, as a mistress, Barbara Bracken did not last very long, and within a year, he had a new mistress who happened to be a Blackwood, Melissa Blackwood. Now, Melissa Blackwood was a different frame entirely. She was, as many Blackwoods are, incidentally, George Martin does like a good, strong family look. Melissa Blackwood was thin, lithe, and did not have particularly buxom breasts, it has to be said. And he heard that Barbara Bracken had poked fun at this fact. And he then officially renamed those two hills between the Blackwoods and the Brackens Missy's, because this was her nickname. Melissa Bracken's nickname was Missy's Teats, and officially gave the land to the Blackwoods. And thus the Brackens and the Blackwoods fought over these two hills, and they both referred to them by different names from that moment on. So it's a little bit of a slightly light-hearted, I guess, and also slightly crude, I guess, aspect to this or way of viewing the Bracken-Blackwood rivalry. So that's one story. There are many stories along these lines. I think the one that it's probably worth, if you're more of a show person than a book person, they did, I think, a reasonable job. And by the way, I see plenty of people donating. Thank you very much. I hugely appreciate this. Just a quick shout out. This is a charity stream. If you are enjoying the stream, if you wish to show your appreciation for House Blackwood or House Bracken or the show, please, if you have money available, this is helping out the people in society who need this the most. But if you're a show person rather than a book person, the show, I think, did a reasonable job of showing this ancient enmity. This goes on for thousands of years between these two houses. And it's a bit to do with religion, that the Blackwoods worship the old gods, and the Brackens very much worship the new gods, the Faith of the Seven. And in the Riverlands, when the Faith of the Seven came in with the Andals, there was this long, very slow Andal invasion, and the Andals would take lands, but they'd also intermarry with families, and the rich and powerful families in the Riverlands would sort of accept the way that the political winds were blowing, and then they say, okay, well, we'll change religion, we'll marry your family, and we'll be okay from that moment on. And the Brackens did that, the Blackwoods didn't. The Blackwoods stood firm, they stayed with their established religion, the religion of the old gods, Weirwood network, etc. And this was a cause of contention for a very long time. And the kind of the founding myth, as far as the Blackwoods are concerned, I say myth, this may be true, it may not be true, is that if you go to Raventree Hall, which is the home of House Blackwood, you will find a weirwood tree there, of course you will. But this weirwood tree is colossal. That's the word we hear about it. Jamie thinks of it as colossal. And Jamie's seen lots of weirwood trees by this point. He's been up to Winterfell. He's been around the Seven Kingdoms, and he thinks of this one as being sort of on a different scale to the other ones that he's seen. That its branches, it's stick. I can't remember the exact phrase, but it's sticking into the sky like spindly hands. And this tree was poisoned, or this tree died, and House Blackwood claimed this was poisoned by the Brackens. This is thousands of years ago, and the tree was dead. And yet, even to this day, every night the ravens gather there. They roost there overnight in their thousands. They all gather there. And then in the morning, when dawn comes, they all fly off again. And this is why it's called Raventree Hall. And this, as a place, we've seen a little bit in the books, but this seems to be one of the key points in the Weirwood network. This is where, if you know this channel, you know that we often say, when in doubt, blame Bloodraven. This is where Bloodraven was born and grew up. Raventree Hall. Let's go to a question from Riga Nargarian. Thinking back to Helena forgiving Alicent for reasons that weren't exactly clear, do you think Alicent could ultimately be involved in Helena's suicide, just putting her out of her misery? Okay, so I can't remember whether this was this last episode or the episode before. Probably the episode before. Alicent is going around. She wants forgiveness for what she's done across the piece. Everything she's done is just like she's caused a war in her mind. Her being with Criston Cole meant that he wasn't out on guard, and did that cost the life of Jaehaerys, her grandson? She's got this huge guilt resting on her. And she's talking to Helena, and then Helena kind of turns around and just says, I forgive you. And you just see this pause, and then you can see how much this means to Alicent. And she clearly took it as forgiveness for the fact that Helena saw that Criston Cole and Alicent were getting it on right at the time when Jaehaerys was killed. But lots of people have speculated that we know what Helena's like. Maybe she's forgiving Alicent for something that she does in the future. Now, I kind of speculated that maybe this was to do with Maelor, who this is the son, Helena and Aegon's son, that we haven't met, that we got told he was there in the book, but we got told by the showrunner that he is not there yet in this timeline, which kind of implies that he might soon appear. And so I speculated maybe that it would be become apparent that Helena was pregnant, and then we would get Maelor appearing later. But that doesn't seem to have happened, so we've got to kind of assume that that's not the case. If Maelor were to arrive as a newborn baby, and then Alicent were to take the newborn baby, hand it to a Kingsguard when King's Landing was falling, thinking she was going to save it, but actually condemning that baby to death, that would be a thing which perhaps Helena could forgive her for. But this is another thing, is that in the book, what happens with Helena is that after the fall of King's Landing, a little bit after the fall of King's Landing, when she hears what happens to Maelor, then she allegedly throws herself out of a window. And there are rumors, perhaps this was Masseria who did this, but either way, Helena clearly would have been traumatized by what happened. And maybe, as you say, maybe actually what it is that Alicent sees the pain that Helena's going through and tries to help her out of that pain. I don't think that seems to be the route that they're going with Helena. Now, Helena in the book is, after Blood and Cheese, she goes to her room, shuts the door, starts crying, and does not emerge again until the end. It's horrific. Her heart is ripped in two by what happened. It's terrible, and she just cannot face it. So that's what happened in the book. On the show, that's not what seems to be. She seems to be out and about, and yeah, clearly she was impacted by this. But she was there in the funeral procession. She's there standing, wandering around the Red Keep, looking at Aegon as he walks past. She's there talking to Alicent. She doesn't seem to have been affected in that same way. Maybe that will happen later, but that doesn't seem to be what it is. So the idea that Alicent might try and put her out of her misery doesn't really seem, at the moment, to work for me. Let's go to Lady Pushkin saying, right, Robert, I'm rewriting the ending to be a happy one, where no dragons die, they're all curled up in their dragon beds by the fire, being petted by their owners. If you could write a happy ending, what would it be? Well, I'd be fascinating what everybody thinks is a happy ending to this. I mean, I'll say the obvious and boring thing first, which is that the story is not set up for a happy ending. This is a tragedy. It's established who the characters are, a situation is created, and then if you just follow the logic all the way down, then terrible and horrible things are going to happen, and it's all pretty inevitable. It's a pretty classic tragedy setup. If I were to write a happy ending to this, personally, I don't think the dragons all surviving and all of the people, their owners, surviving is a happy ending. I mean, I'm by instinct team small folk on this, and the small folk tend not to do well when there's lots of dragons around, and when there are lots of dragon riders around who don't care much about the small folk. So if I were to do a happy ending for this, then I mean, I don't know. The characters who seem to be good people would definitely survive. I'll put it there. So Helena would survive. Helena would be happy, and poor old Lord Beesbury probably would still be with us. Joe Rose saying Jesus' dog on Helena's lap. Yeah, that would be perfect. I'd be very happy with that. Joel Thompson saying Jesus' dog on the throne is the happy ending. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all about Jesus' dog. That would definitely work. Thank you to the anonymous people who've been donating. I very much appreciate that. Let's have and Martin S as well. I see, just because I saw your name as it was passing through. Thank you very much. Polnitsky saying all dragons fly west. Happy ending. Yeah, that's absolutely. I would be happy if the dragons are happy doing that, then that works for me. Constantine Tranos, does Rhaenyra's line in episode 4 about unleashing horrors for a purpose greater than the crown foreshadow the burden of Aegon's prophecy turning her dark for the Targaryens to stay in power? I mean, I don't know whether it's foreshadowing. I mean, it feels like that's what happened, is that part of justification for unleashing the dragons is because of Aegon's prophecy. She spent the first half of this season, I think to her credit, trying to avoid war, trying to hold back the dragons, trying to see whether she could get some kind of negotiated peace, seeing whether there was any chance of not an all-out dragon war. It was only when she felt that she'd exhausted every possibility that she then said, okay, yeah, well, we'll send the dragons out. Now, when we had that conversation between her and Jace, then she basically said she wasn't sure whether she believed the prophecy to start with, which was interesting. If you missed it, by the way, yesterday, day before, I put out a video on my main channel about this prophecy and why it was kept a secret, why it was only passed from ruler to heir. So if you're interested in that, then go and check out that video. But basically, she says that when she was first told it, she didn't really believe it. And now she feels she has to believe it because that makes there be a reason for what she's doing. So it doesn't feel like she really believes it for what it is. It feels like this is some kind of comfort for her, is some kind of way that she can help justify to herself what she knows is going to be the human cost of what's going to happen. Let's go to George R.R. Tolkien. Salutations, Robert. A couple of episodes ago, Rhaenyra was saying that Sea Smoke had been restless and acted strange. Do you think this is them confirming that Laenor is dead? Once Sea Smoke is claimed, it should confirm her theory. Okay, I did cover this a little bit earlier. Apologies, I should have rounded this one up with that. But I think this still leaves open the different possibilities that we've got. A possibility that we will find out that Laenor is dead. A possibility that we're going to get new dragon law, that a dragon can be abandoned by one owner, one rider, and then claim another one, or be claimed by another one. And then thirdly, they'll just wave their hands and hope that we don't notice. So I think those three options are still on the table here. The fact that Sea Smoke is restless, in and of itself, does not confirm anything. It is suggestive. What it's suggestive of, though, is not clear. It could be suggestive that Laenor is dead. It could be suggestive that Sea Smoke has finally accepted that Laenor's not coming back and wants to move on. It could be suggestive that Sea Smoke loves war and wants to be involved and needs a rider. So there are a few different possibilities about what's going on here. I mean, I guess this is going to be something we will just have to wait and see where they go with it. I'm going to give them enough credit to say that I don't think that they're just going to do the hand wave and hope we don't notice thing. I think that at the very least we will get a throwaway line that says, I knew, I've been reading an old scroll. Rhaenyra could say that. She's been reading lots of old scrolls. I've been reading an old scroll. I discovered that way back 350 years ago, one dragon was abandoned by its rider who went off to do some gardening somewhere. And then the dragon needed another owner, and so a new person came along, and that was all okay. I suspect we will get something like that. I'm sure that it won't be that level of detail with the gardener, but you get the point. So if I had to guess, that's where they're going to go with it. No Diggity saying Lenore crossed the Rainbow Bridge. I mean, that's possibly. And Stephanie Frederick saying being awesome as usual. Martin S. I would completely agree with that. Zach K. Thank you very much for your donation. And Luke S. saying if Lenore was dead, they would have shown it. I mean, not. I suspect not on screen. I suspect we would just hear about it rather than be shown it. That might be what you meant. John Swino saying not a long episode, 55 minutes. I don't know the time of the episode, I have to admit. Jordan Vicarious saying, hi, I have a theory that the first time Aegon I cut himself on the throne in his grief and realization at the cost of peace, he unintentionally put a curse on the Iron Throne. What do you think? It's possible. I did do a video ages ago about whether the Iron Throne judges the people who are there. I think I took that one down. I will replace that one at some point. Just on the episode lengths, though, I have seen a tweet which I think was right. Follow me on Twitter, by the way, X. I put a lot of random stuff out on there. Then that said the episode lengths for the last 3 episodes, and I think they were all over an hour. And a couple of them were over 70 minutes. So the basic answer, I think, on the episode timings is that whereas we're going down from 10 episodes to 8 episodes, we're not going down by the 20% in terms of actual screen time. It's actually a bit less than that because the episodes on the whole have actually been longer. Let's go to James Horner. Hi, Robert. First, thanks to you and your moderators for creating this amazing space. Yes, let's do a bit of moderator love. Moderators, you are amazing. And people keep on sending me messages to say how fantastic you are. And so I'm passing this on to you now. It's very important to me that if you're watching this live, if you're in the chat here on YouTube, I know a lot of people are watching this over on X. Hi there, by the way, if you are, great to see you. But on YouTube, when we've got the chat here, then the moderators do a fantastic job keeping this a place for uplifting and intelligent conversation and debate about the things that we love, making sure that there's no spoilers, making sure that there's no awkward customers. So if you are here in the chat watching this live, please just show a little bit of love to the moderators because they deserve every bit of love they can get. All right. Anyway, James Horner. Do you think that the Faith of the Seven incorporated elements of the old gods' religion when it arrived in Westeros? I'm thinking of things like opposition to slavery, the Lord's right, guest right, and kinslaying being the most cursed sin. These are things that both cultures and religions have in common. But they're not really seen in Essos, excepting Braavos in regard to slavery, much how Christianity adopted many pagan traditions as it spread across Europe. So I think this is a really interesting idea. The idea that the Faith of the Seven came across with the Andals, with the Andal invasion. And the invasion is probably the wrong word in terms of what it kind of conjures. This was a slow, armoured immigration. It's probably the best way of saying this, over hundreds of years. And it wasn't like one big invasion where a person said, right, let's go over to Westeros, get in the boats, guys. Da, 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 da. That's not how this happened. This was just a slow movement away, escaping the Valyrian freehold as it happened. So when they encountered the religion of Westeros, the old gods, how did they react to it? Now, we're told slightly contradictory things, to be honest. Sometimes we're told that they chop down weirwoods. Other times we're told that they when they kind of married into a family, they allowed the weirwood tree, the godswood, to stay there. Sometimes they even planted a weirwood tree, a godswood, if they were setting up a new place in order to kind of ingratiate themselves with the locals. So it's clear that this was not an a planned move across the piece, that everybody was always just going to be doing a certain thing. But it's also clear that this was not a matter of just getting rid of all aspects of this old religion. So might we see them accepting a few elements of the worship of the old gods? Quite possibly. I think some things would have come very easy, like the anti-slavery thing. We don't see that a lot in Essos, but the reason we don't see that a lot in Essos is because most of Essos had been either conquered or were under the influence of the Valyrian freehold, which had slavery. So the Andals, who escaped, they would naturally be anti-slavery because they probably will have seen a lot of their own people taken off to be made into slaves. So that probably wasn't an old gods thing. Things like kinslaying and guest right being uh, held up as really bad sins. My instinct is that these were probably already seen as sins, bad things in the Faith of the Seven over in Essos, but they just got a little bit more emphasis. It's not like they were all right with kinslaying, and then suddenly they came to Westeros and thought, "Oh, we need to mix with the locals. Let's say that we're really against kinslaying." That's not how this worked. I'm not saying you suggested that that's how this worked, but I think it strikes me as more kind of natural that those kinds of things fitted with the more human approach that we've got here. So the faith is not what we would see today when you have like a religion which is like the same across everywhere. It is the priests are university educated. That's not exactly how we have this over in Westeros. So the Faith of the Seven, yes, they've got their highly educated, metropolitan, urban elite kind of people who they know all of the things inside and out. When you actually get to the grassroots level of this, and we see this a lot in things like A Feast for Crows, incidentally, with Septon Meribald and people like that. A lot of these septons, they can barely read. They're just passing on the things that they can remember. So the idea that there are these strictures which have been, everybody has to believe these certain things. Yeah, they do. But then if everybody's grown up thinking kinslaying is really, 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 really bad, guest right is really, really, really important, and then somebody becomes a member, a septon or whatever, and they don't get a chance to read all of the holy texts, they're just like, okay, well, we'll get that and we'll merge that with what I already think is true because it doesn't contradict anything. And I think that's the key point, is that these things do not contradict what the faith is saying. Let's go to a Greek weirwood saying, shouldn't they have to read the Book of the Seven? Yeah, but they'd have to teach them to read first. Is the fact. There are plenty of septons, not so many scepters, actually, as we said, plenty of septons that we read about in the pages of Song of Ice and Fire and Fire and Blood who seem not to be able to read. Let's go to Madeline Tyrell-Dayne saying, hi, Robert. Hello. Which Targaryen do you think Hugh Hammer is descended from? Do you think Ulf is really Balon's son, or could he be descended from another Targaryen, or even no Targaryen, despite becoming a dragon rider? Awed by how, despite the Song of Ice and Fire world being a gruesome and distressing place, you have built around it a community which is safe, peaceful, and comforting. Thank you to the mods for their huge role in this. And that's mod love again from me and from Madeline. So, Ulf claims that he is Balon's son. Whether we believe him or not is another matter. Hugh looked quite Targaryen. He's quite bulky and beefy, but he does look quite Targaryen, um, with the silver hair. So, who might he be descended from? Well, the more I think about it, the more Balon actually seems quite a likely candidate. So, Balon is Viserys and Daemon's father, and he was married, and seemingly very in love with his wife, who died when he was 28. Now, what do we know about Balon? Um, we're told that he was brave, foolhardy, perhaps. We are told that he had what they often call in Fire and Blood lusty appetites. He comes across as being actually quite similar to Daemon in many ways. He loved to fly. He loved to spend time with his wife alone. He loved to, I mean, the first time he ever met Balerion the Black Dread, he booped it on the nose, which was seen as a rather foolhardy but also quite brave thing to do. When he was just a small child, it has to be said. He was made a knight at a very young age. This is a character who doesn't seem very prim and proper. Now, the way that we're told in Fire and Blood was that his wife died, and then after that, he was so bereft that he never looked at another woman again. Um, that strikes me as the kind of thing that the Maesters would say. I mean, this guy, I mean, 28's not that old. And yeah, we can certainly accept that maybe he didn't want to marry again. But for a man of such lusty appetites, are we to expect that he didn't ever see another woman again? I mean, it's certainly possible. So, given their ages, Ulf and Hugh, that seems like the most likely generation. We're looking at probably one of Jaehaerys and Alicent's children, and of them all, Balon seems the most likely. So maybe they're sort of half brothers. It's not entirely clear. They're both obviously based in King's Landing, so I mean, who knows? Whether we're told, I think, is a different matter. I think it's the intriguing thing is what Hugh is told, if anything, because he's there. Clearly, he looks quite Targaryen, and who does he think that his parents are? That's almost certainly something which will come out. If we get anything approximating the Dragon Seed story, I mean, we'll get something approximating the Dragon Seed story, but in terms of they invite the bastard children of Targaryens to come forward, surely he will have to say, yeah, so I'm the bastard son of whoever. So perhaps we'll find out. We know what Ulf is going to say. The question with Ulf is actually more, is this just like a big blag on his part? Is he just, has he made something up that he thinks he can make some money out of? It's possible. The character as we've seen him so far doesn't appear particularly trustworthy, so I'd be more inclined to believe Hugh than Ulf, but why not both? Andrew Kay saying Ulf on the show strikes me as that kind of boaster or teller of tall tales type. So who knows? Yeah, absolutely. Um, Lone Wolf saying Balon was Hand of the King. Maybe it was for him that was built the secret passage in Chataya's brothel. Yeah, well, this is quite interesting. So this is, if you remember, that there's a secret passage um, that Varys tells Tyrion and shows Tyrion down and says, here's a way that this was built for a previous Hand of the King, basically to get out from the Tower of the Hand to a brothel, but they didn't want anybody to know. And the fandom have broadly come to the assumption that this must have been Tywin, who definitely, if he were doing that, wouldn't want anybody to know. And there are some kind of hints in the text. There's a kind of, as a kid wandering around with kind of Lannister features. There's some stained glass in yellow and gold. That kind of thing that makes you go, well, maybe that's what they're hinting at. But yeah, possibly this was the Hand of the King. I mean, he wasn't the Hand of the King for very long. Is the only argument against that. He was, I mean, it was a few years, 2 or 3 years maybe. I don't know the exact amount, but it wasn't a huge amount of time. Whether it was enough amount of time to go, right, we need to have, I need a an underground passage built for me. And Judith Bradford saying brothels usually don't last hundreds of years. A fair point. No Diggity saying Magor did nothing wrong. Agree to disagree on that one. Catherine Furseth saying, hi Robert, I found your speculation that Laris was Daemon's secret ally on the Green Council fascinating. And for anyone who missed this, it's a throwaway line in Fire and Blood where it's in the build up to Blood and Cheese, and in Blood and Cheese this is very much a Daemon thing. And we're told that he still, the paragraph goes something like, he still had many friends in the Gold Cloaks and in the rougher parts of the city of King's Landing, and also an ally in the Green Council. And then it kind of moves on. And it leaves you to wonder, because it's not mentioned at all, there's no reference at all later, but it leaves you to wonder, who might this be? And there's a simple game that you can play to say, well, okay, it's not going to be Otto, it's not going to be Alicent. It's clearly, given what happens later, not going to be Ironrod or Tywin Lannister, which kind of leaves two options, really, being option A, Grand Maester Allwyle, or option B, Laris. And Allwyle doesn't seem the type to be an ally of Daemon, so Laris seems to be the most likely, particularly given in the book that he's got a very unclear set of priorities. So that seems to be it. They haven't picked up on this in the show at all. There's no hint of it. There's nothing there at all. So my working assumption at the moment is that this isn't a show thing. This was a book thing. But anyway, Catherine says, in Fire and Blood, when Rhaenyra took King's Landing, we read this about Aemond, who at the time is at Harrenhal. So the way it happens in the book is that Aemond flies up to Harrenhal. Kristen Cole's army goes up to Harrenhal. King's Landing is therefore left unprotected. Rhaenyra comes in. Aemond wakes up in Harrenhal and goes, well, hang on a moment, let's have a party first of all, because we've taken Harrenhal, but then hang on a moment, where's Daemon gone? Where's his army? Oh, and now I've got a raven telling me that King's Landing's fallen, and he gets really angry because he suddenly realized, he must certainly have realized that this is his fault, but he wishes to take it out on other people. So we read this: his fury was fearsome to behold. First to suffer was Sir Simon Strong. Poor Sir Simon. Sir Simon protested his innocence, insisting that he was a true and loyal servant of the crown. His own great nephew, Laris Strong, was Lord of Harrenhal and King Aegon's Master of Whisperers, he reminded the Prince Regent. These denials only inflamed Aemon's suspicions. The clubfoot was a traitor as well, he decided. How else would Daemon and Rhaenyra have known when King's Landing was most vulnerable? Someone on the small council had sent word to them, and Laris Clubfoot was Breakbone's brother and thus an uncle to Rhaenyra's bastards. So, says Catherine, book canon might be interpreted as Laris being partly on Team Black. How do you think the show will solve this? Larry as a secret black loyalist revealed in a big plot twist, or Laris playing both sides? Well, it's an interesting one. I don't say the first bit of this, the Daemon had a secret ally bit, is so far it's book only. and they played up Simon Strong. Simon Strong's only mentioned like twice in Fire and Blood. Once when Damon arrives, then once when Aemond arrives there. So his role is very much beefed up on the show. So, um, uh, him. I mean, we can already imagine him like suddenly claiming to be an arch loyalist because he like immediately claimed to be an arch loyalist to Damon when Damon arrived. Him doing the same thing to Aemond, but Aemond not accepting it, I think would probably tell us quite a lot about Aemond. But are they going to play this idea that Laris is therefore working for Damon? I think they will play, and we've already seen this when we got. Do you remember that scene last episode where Aemond takes control, and then you get the camera just focuses on Alicent, and for about a minute or so, it very slowly pans into her, and we can see the look on her face, which is sort of like scared, trying to digest what just happened, concerned about what's going on a little, and just like almost panicking. And we're so transfixed. I mean, great bit of acting, by the way. We're so transfixed by the face that we don't really hear what's going on in the background. And one of the things that's going on in the background, so Aemond is basically barking out these orders to people. And one of the things he does is he basically turns to Laris, it would appear, and he's sort of saying, "And you, what about you? You let Harrenhal fall. This is your place. Why on earth? How on earth could you let that?" And then there's just kind of this kind of pause, and Laris seems not to respond, as far as we can tell. It's all off camera. And then Aemond goes and talks about something else. So already we've got this idea that Aemond probably doesn't 100% trust Laris. So I think the way they're going to do it, they may not. I think the way they're going to do it is to show that Aemond thinks that maybe Laris has betrayed them, but we don't know that that's the case. Raven's oath. In fact, just quickly going, Carl Karsnark in the chat saying, yes, Alicent's dread at the realization of how she's ruined things for herself and all others, and all other potential female rulers is great. You played yourself. Yeah, so Raven's oath saying, good evening, Robert. What did you believe the goal of Alinda meeting Deanna is, or what's the mission? Is it take the weight of the small folks' views, see if they can be a force against the green? Perhaps this may be the show's setting up for the events to come later in the Dragon Pit. Yeah, so I think probably all of these things, but I mean, you did say riots in brackets. They said riots ? Yeah, we have in one of the trailers we have a riot. We don't know when that's going to happen. There is a riot of the small folk in King's Landing. Now, what might the context for what? We'll try and join these dots up in a moment. The context for what Messalina was saying was that maybe you don't have to win this with wars. And then so there must be, this is trying to win King's Landing in a way that doesn't involve armies. And then where do we see Alinda Massey go? She goes to Deanna, who personally herself has to have some kind of a dislike of Team Green. So joining these, and we know now, and they could have put her anywhere. The TV show decided, because she's not a book character, the TV show decided that they wanted her to be there in the middle of this. I mean, I don't even know what it is, drinking establishment, brothel, whatever, that seems to be where lots of people go, and lots of gossip happens. And so we've got Alinda Massey going to her, the person who's got an agenda, probably against Team Green, on behalf of Messalina, with a view to how do we win, how do we get rid of the Greens. This is about the people, turning the people against Team Green in some way. So how they're going to do that, it's something to do with sort of the gossiping, the talking to people, winning the battle of, and they've talked a bit about, if you watch the behind the scenes episodes, they talk about this quite a bit. This is something about the propaganda war. In whose side are the people on? What do they think of the different people, different sides? Can Masseria manage to find a way to persuade the people to turn against the Greens? That's what we've got going on here. Let's go. AJ Bishop or AJ Bishop saying, do you think we potentially get to something to do with the shepherd in this season? A little hint of him. And actually, that was picking up a little bit of what Raisin's Oath saying. Yes, I think this is definitely a start or the next step to the shepherd and what happens in what will be season 3, the storm of the dragon pit. So, spoilers again, spoiler warning for what happens in the books. So, once Rhaenyra has taken over King's Landing, the people slowly turn against her for a variety of reasons. They're running out of food, the taxes go up, lots of people are sort of killed and hung from the walls of the Red Keep. She basically doesn't seem to do a job. Whether they'll show this on the TV show or give us some more context, I don't know. But she, in the book, doesn't seem to do a very good job of managing it all. And eventually, there's this rabble-rousing priest called the Shepherd, who convinces everyone, the small folk, the Targaryens are no good. The dragons are no good. And basically, the people have to rise up and get rid of the Targaryens and get rid of the dragons. And he leads this army of small folk. He preaches to the masses for days, weeks, and then he leads this army of small folk up to the dragon pit, where they just storm it, and in their thousands, tens of thousands, they just take out the dragons who are there. So that's a huge defining moment here in this war. That doesn't happen out of nowhere. And what they've done, I think, really well is start to set this up. They've started to show that people turning against the Targaryens, turning against the dragons. I thought the dragons were God. No, they're just meat. The dragons can be killed. Rhaenyra the monstrous, Aegon, he's horrific. He hung all of these completely innocent rat catchers. Daemon, he's a tyrant. Again and again, we get all of this view until this overarching feeling comes that the Targaryens, they're just wrong for us. They're bad for us. So we're building up to it. I suspect the shepherd will be a season 3 only thing. I don't think we're actually going to get him appearing until season 3, but we're laying the groundwork here in season 2. Let's go to a Greek weirwood. I've no idea where the context of this is. All mushrooms are edible. Some are only edible once. Yeah, I get that. Let's Constantine Tranos saying, do you think the struggles that Rhaenyra and Daemon face in achieving their goals after their split make an example of Maester Aemon's line, a Targaryen alone in the world is a terrible thing? Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. Catherine Furseth saying, I find it interesting how the show sets up Daemon and Aemon as both paralleling and contrasting each other, both dangerous, violent, etc. I do wonder how the show will play out the different arcs. Daemon seems much more at ease with himself and the world, apart from facing his inner demons in Harrenhal, and seems to accept to some degree who he is and also who he loves, his brother and Rhaenyra. Aemond, on the other hand, is young, rash, full of anger, and perhaps even confusion about himself. Daemon is not a good person, but somehow the viewers do not doubt that he would never burn or kill his own brother. How do you see the show completing their arcs? Well, I think that's a really good observation, which is one of the key things for Daemon was his love for his brother. Now, the relationship was not good. There's lots of baggage going on there, but Daemon clearly did love his brother. Aemond clearly did not. Now, if you flip it the other way, Viserys clearly loved his brother. Aegon clearly did not. He did not show love to his brother. And so what we've got actually is the reciprocal of what came to them. So as much as we're talking about what the compare and contrast between Daemon and Aemond, we do always have to remember, what is it that's come to them? What is it that they've kind of had that has shaped them in terms of the love that they've had coming to them. In terms of their character arcs, I think it's reasonably clear if you look at what Damon's spirit quest, whatever we're going to call it, in Harrenhal is. This is about him facing all of these issues from his past, his conscience, as it were. The accusations are coming to him. So I think it's not too hard to make the leap to say that his character arc is taken to a point where he has to come to terms with that in some way. Whether it's a full redemption arc, whether it's just like him accepting who he is, we don't know yet. But that's the arc they're taking to as a better place in terms of his understanding of who he is. Aemond is quite interesting because in some ways he's admitting who he is to his lover in King's Landing. And he's being fearsomely honest there. He isn't. He's got this public facade where he's just playing this role. But then when we saw him like curled up naked, confessing things, and it's like, well, I didn't really feel guilty about that thing. I did feel guilty about that. That was bad. That was on me. And it does actually feel as if he's some of he's really quite in touch with himself. It's just that he feels he has this facade. So I do wonder whether we're going to reach a point where he realizes that he doesn't need this facade. Is that going to happen when the two of them come together? Because their arcs, it's not the only things that their arcs are about, but their arcs will end up with the two of them coming together. At which point, at least Damon will be there. Yeah, Aemond will say, "You've lived too long," and Damon will say, "On that we agree." So they should reach a point of understanding each other. The question, I think, is less about Damon. I think Damon's arc is looking reasonably clear now, to some sort of greater understanding of himself. On the show, I don't think this is the case in the book, but on the show, that's certainly there. With Aemond, I don't think we're far enough in yet to know that. We probably won't be until he gets to Harrenhal, and we'll see what comes at him. But yeah, he appears to know all of this. It's just he doesn't want to show it to anyone. Let's go to Paul Al-Gaib saying, "Hi, Robert. I hope you're well. Is it true that the Crownlands are basically always loyal to whomever controls Dragonstone, from Aegon's conquest to the War of the Five Kings? If so, is there a strategic reason for that, since it seems a bit odd given that Dragonstone is an island? Also, did you or someone in the chat notice that in the last episode, Aegon's burns are on the wrong side of his face? In episode 4, Vhagar attacked from Aegon's right side, yet we see his left face has the horrible burns." Now, I had not noticed this, so I'm going to throw this to the chat. I don't doubt that this is true, but does anyone have any explanation beyond what the boring explanation is that this is just a production markup or a production. Sometimes they do without telling us, but they just think, oh, it looks better the other way around, and they just like do a mirror thing. Did people notice that? If they did, do you think that there's anything to it? It's not something, as I say, I'd really noticed before. In terms of your first question, the Crownlands, yeah. So the Crownlands is an interesting part of the Seven Kingdoms, because the Crownlands is that area around King's Landing, and whereas the other kind of regions they've got an ancient family that ruled them, or maybe it's a newer family that is the Lord Paramount. You've got the Starks in the north, you've got the Lannisters in the Westland, whatever. The Crownlands, they report direct to the Crown. They don't have a Lord Paramount. It's just to the crown. So they are or should be loyal to the crown. And Dragonstone is the place that is always technically for the islands and things around it. Technically, that's where the sort of the money flows up. This kind of system, the money flows up from the bottom to the top, and it goes up particularly from the islands around there, and also some of the um, places like Cracklaw Point to the money, theoretically at least. I'm not going to go down the whole Cracklaw Point kind of rabbit hole. If you know it, you know it. If you don't, it's not worth worrying about. The money flows up to Dragonstone. And that comes from the fact that was disputed lands there to start with. And so there was not an ancient family that always ruled that land. And it was not as populated before. King's Landing was not a city, was not even a settlement before the Targaryens landed. And then also a lot of those places, they submitted personally to the Targaryens. In Cracklaw Point, they submitted personally to Visenya. And from that time on, they claimed that they owed allegiance to the Targaryens personally, not via anybody else, which made it slightly more complex after the War of the Five Kings, because it's like we don't owe fealty to Dragonstone, we owe fealty to the throne. Now Howland saying he turned away. This is about which side the blast was. Parascopic saying he was attacked from the right, but he turns more right into his elbow, exposing the left side of his face to deflect the blast. Carl Karstark saying, I see the burns as a mirror image of Viserys's deteriorated state by the end of things, like father, like son. That's a really interesting point. Okay, there's a lot of good points in there, so thank you for that. I've got a couple more questions from my patrons. Then I will try and pick up as much from the chat as I can. Adam Geets saying, hi, Robert and Dan. Assuming that Maelor the Missing is introduced at some point, I wanted to hear your thoughts on how the show would depict his death at Bitterbridge. I'm thinking the story is too dark for TV, and maybe he is dropped or pulled from the arms of the Kingsguard. Do you think they would really show a baby or young child getting crushed or smothered? Since this shows more of the same backlash of the people against the crown, I think it's important to show the event. Well, whether they actually show it, I think, is not really the point here. So Blood and Cheese was pretty horrific, but you'll find what they did was they kind of panned the camera away, and we heard things rather than saw them. That's the kind of thing that they could easily show. For those who don't know, Maelor, again, spoilers, Maelor, who is the youngest child of Helena and Aegon, when King's Landing falls, decision is made, we're going to get him out. They hand him to a Kingsguard, say, go to Old Town. Kingsguard rides away, and eventually people figure out who he is, and then all rush him, grab the baby from him, and do horrific things. Are they going to show that? I mean, I don't think they need to show it. They can just show the pack of people just descending down like that. So I think they will include it if they bring Maelor into this, which they might not now. As I say, if they were going to, I would have expected by this point to get Helena say, "I'm pregnant," but we've not seen that. But if they do this, then yeah, I would expect they would do it a bit like that. Dismember him, says Ard29. Yeah. TRD Farmer, 2 hours to airtime. Yes, absolutely. And Adam Geets also saying, everyone seems concerned about whether Nettles will be in the show or not. As you have said, her story is a little later after the original Dragon Seeds. As the Dragon Seeds are approaching various dragons, they can show a random girl bringing a sheep to a dragon. They don't need to say her name. She can be doing this as various people are trying to bond with various dragons, some successfully, most not. I'm interested to see the unsuccessful attempts, I must say. Yeah, so for reasons I set out in my Thursday live stream, I was feeling confident about Nettles appearing. I'm now less confident. This is a combination of what we saw in the trailer, what we had in George R. R. Martin's Not a Blog the other day, and also the exhortation from Dream Lena to Damon to be looking after, or asking, has he looked after their children? So I'm less strong on this than I was before. But that said, yes, if they wish to bring in Nettles, they do not need to do so just yet. I still hold by that position. That's entirely doable. I would also agree with you that seeing this should be some massive dragon lore information for us. If we see how people bond with dragons who we're not necessarily, we've seen a few people bonding with dragons before. We saw Aemond climbing on back of Vhagar, etc., but it generally seems a lot more expected, like, oh, this person's clearly a Targaryen, they're just going to choose a dragon, and there's no real fear there. Here there will be. Here lots of people will die. It seems a lot more of a lottery, but we will see a lot more about what makes it happen when one person or another person bonds with the dragon. Why? How? So yeah, I completely agree with all of that. Let's go to the chat. Courtney L. Conover, I thought it was confirmed long ago that Nettles wasn't included now, and we've had no confirmation. Ryan Condell has simply not discussed it. Judith Bradford saying, is Alice Rivers the Woods Witch whose prophecy influenced Aerys' marriage to Rhaella? This is the Woods Witch who later becomes known as the Ghost of High Heart. She certainly doesn't seem to resemble her physically, but that doesn't necessarily exclude her. This is one of those things where we have no evidence to say it isn't, but at the same time, I don't think we've got any evidence really to say that she is. So feel free to make up your own headcanon where that's come from. Christian Danielson's asking where Mushroom is in the show. Yeah, they've kind of left him out. There was, I think, certainly in season 1, there was a character who appeared very briefly for about a second at a wedding that probably was supposed to be Mushroom, but we're not being given Mushroom, basically. Christian Donaldson saying the Shepherd becomes a Dragon Rider plot twist. That would be a big plot twist. Carolina Clay saying the evidence is that the Ghost of High Heart is a little person and Alice isn't. Yep, agreed. And Judith Bradford adding, by the time Duncan Targaryen is born, she'd be ancient. She knows about the Prince Promise and is connected with the children of the forest. Okay. We are now less than 2 hours from the show airing. So what I will do is, as I normally do at this point, is just say, firstly, patrons, thank you so much. I cannot do what I do without your support. I hugely appreciate it. Secondly, moderators, you are amazing. You did a fantastic job again today. I saw you in the chat being brilliant as always. Thirdly, I've got videos. I think I'm going to have a video, my breakdown video. I'll bring it on the Tuesday, and I'll bring out a lore video on the Monday this week, just to mix things up a little bit. But Thursday here on this channel is going to be my Q&A as always. This time next week is going to be my pre-show live stream for episode 7. Wow, we're there already. But if you're watching this back a little bit later, appearing somewhere around here is a link to other live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here is a link to my Patreon page. If you would like to support this channel, that's the best way to do it. Thank you very much. And that is all for this time. Take care, everyone. I will see you again soon. Enjoy the episode.